So let's talk about religion. I had a comment on my channel a few videos ago, kind of discussing religion and basically how they think that without religion, you know, you don't have a moral code or a moral standing really to be held accountable for. And I highly disagree. Because I know plenty of people who claim to be religious who will screw you over in a heartbeat. Whew. Just because they get the opportunity. Now you might say, well, they're not really followers of whatever faith they claim to be. To which I say, hey, well then how do you explain the person who's an atheist who will go out of their way to make sure that they do right by you? They don't believe that they're doing right by you is somehow going to be rewarded in the afterlife. They're really just doing it for the here and the now, for our short few years that we have here on this floating blue rock out in the middle of a great giant universe. I just really feel like we assume that because somebody's an atheist that they don't care, or that they're not a good person, or that they don't have morals. And the several atheists that I know are probably some of the best people that I know. You know, they don't do things for me because they feel like they're required to. They don't do things for others because it pleases some invisible being, omnipotent, you know, never really there that you can tangibly see or feel being. They do it because they want to be a nice person. They want to be a good person. Man, it's Friday and there's nobody at the bar? What? Go figure. But yeah, I definitely don't agree with the idea that just because somebody doesn't believe in God or gods or some other supreme being, that somehow they're morally defective or deficient. You know, for myself, I don't believe that there is, you know, a God like everybody who believes in God thinks. Meaning that I'm open to the idea. I just don't see the evidence. You know, I see the argument people make of, you know, what would all this be for if not for a God? And I say, well, what's the reason for anything that happens in life? We have plenty of evidence that beings, large and small, have come and gone on this planet. For what reason? Obviously not for us, because they existed before we ever existed. And they played no real role in our day-to-day existence. So this God that we want to believe exists, you know, he was what, just playing around before he decided to finally make us? I don't know. I don't believe that. Or at least the evidence that I see gives a stronger argument to there not really being a God. That's not to say there isn't a creator. I'm open to the idea of a creator. What does that mean? What that means is no different than some science lab who creates a colony of bacteria for the sheer study of the colony of bacteria. I'm open to the idea that that's what we could be, or that that's what we are, or were. Maybe we're just the leftovers from some grand experiment done by a being who may or may not still be alive. To me, there's just as much evidence of that. Because yeah, you could look at it and you could say, okay, well that explains a lot of the strange coincidences that people always argue are the proof of God, because things have to be just right. Okay, you're right. In a laboratory setting, you do have to have controlled elements, you know, temperature, humidity, pressure, all kinds of stuff to run experiments. Could we just be an experiment? Could life just be an experiment? And in my opinion, that has a much stronger chance of being the reality. Why? Because we do it. We aren't these supreme beings that live forever and, you know, have mastered control of matter and can create worlds. However, we do have scientists who create and engineer all kinds of bugs and bacteria. Who's to say that we're no different than our creators, just on a smaller scale? That life is mimicking life. Ooh, it's kind of hard to see. That's one of the downsides to the sun setting on the horizon like that. Hopefully my tail light is bright enough right now that anybody who might come up from behind sees me. So what do I believe happens when we die? I believe that our metabolism stops, that the core of our body cools to room temperature, that the things that make us us cease to be us. The energy that we are dissipates and either radiates into the sky or is absorbed by the earth, depending on how they get rid of us. And is that sad to you? Is that something that makes you unhappy? Not me. I like the idea that for a time I will exist in a much grander scale. The parts that are me will be nutrients for some other being. Whether it's blades of grass, or an animal, or just solar radiation. You know, obviously I'd much prefer to be buried in the ground, to be absorbed and turned into energy for some other being, whatever energy that is, whether it's plant matter that a being comes along and eats later, and I exist within them in that sense. You know, the cheap way out is cremation. And what do I mean by cheap? Well, obviously monetarily cheap, but also cheap in the sense that your energy, the things that make you you, the cells, that gets burned up and it gets expunged into the atmosphere, off into space, in trillions of different directions, absorbed by very little. So you kind of go to waste. if you're cremated. Something to think about. Now, obviously, that's a weird way to think, you know, about death, but one of the lessons my father taught me before he died was that we all gotta die. Now, obviously, you know, that's an easy lesson to teach and learn, but he made it clear, like, he was never gonna live forever. Just like I'm not gonna live forever. No one's gonna live forever. We all gotta die. So making the most of life, that's to me the goal, right? Be good to one another now. Don't go and murder someone because you don't like them, whatever. Because the chances are you'll spend the rest of your life rotting in a cell somewhere. What's the point of that? No. Be a good person. Don't do things that harm others. Do things that make others' lives as great as you want your life to be. Am I a perfect person? A perfect being? By no means. There's plenty of flaws that I have. But at the same time, I'm not doing things out of some religious, you know, belief that my actions are pleasing to some greater being, and for that I'll be eternally saved. Nah. I'm gonna gamble on the here and what I can see, the now. I'm gonna take my chances that there isn't anything after this that I will know, and that my legacy will live through me now, and in my children that I raise, and in the lives of those who I can influence, and hopefully I do a good job at it. And that's it. Simple, really.